So, episode 1, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling excited. Looking forward to having some really purposeful conversations with Caroline Hamilton, who's, I think, arguably one of our biggest influences in STEM. Would you say?
Massively. Yeah, 100%. Like, in terms of women that you look up to, in terms of women championing women, like, I think we couldn't have had a better guest for episode 1.
And I think one of the big things is that probably we are here doing this podcast because she gave us a chance a few years ago to take that sideways step from being a teacher of STEM to being in the edtech world, and that's how we are here. So
I'm speaking for both of us here, but for us, the idea that we're talking about women in STEM is massively important in episode 1. I feel like it sets the tone of the podcast. I feel it sets the tone of things that we are really passionate about.
Yeah, and I think that sort of we have lived experiences of being women in STEM, so we've got lots we can bring to the conversation. Ultimately, STEM is all genders, all backgrounds, all styles, and hopefully throughout the series we can really get that across. But I think today's episode is more about how that underrepresentation of women in STEM can be a big conversation.
Have you experienced any sort of challenges, do you think? Like, if, you know, when you talk about being a woman in STEM, does anything kind of come up for you?
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of science teachers refer to themselves as a scientist. And I think that people have a perception of what a scientist should look like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you Google scientist, you'll see it for yourself. And I don't quite fit that mould that some people imagine I should look like. So often if I say I'm a science teacher, people say, well, you don't look like one. I mean, I do, because I am.
I can imagine that even, you know, when you meet people and it's like, oh, what do you teach? Science. Well, you don't look like you teach science.
Yeah. And people start picking other subjects, and I'm not even remotely offended because they're all really complex subjects to teach. It's just that people have this perception of what a teacher of each subject should look like, and evidently I don't look like the subject that I do teach and that I am passionate about. And I don't want that perception to be passed on to the younger generations. And I don't just mean science teachers. I mean, any STEM career. I want the girls to see themselves in that place.
Yeah. And I think for me, this is something that we talk about with Caroline as well, is that confidence in women in leadership roles and STEM roles, something I have struggled with massively. That idea of imposter syndrome, or, you know, that you shouldn't be the person that's in this position, or you shouldn't be the person that people are going to talk about this. And I think, obviously I can't speak for everyone, but it's something that I feel that women can struggle more with, and it's something I definitely like to overcome. It's becoming less as I get older, I suppose, but it is definitely something that I struggle with massively. So all really important topics to discuss, and that we will introduce with Caroline very shortly. I know I'm excited.
I am. I feel like I've thrown the word excited about quite a lot about this, but I just really am. It's quite different from going to having someone who interviewed you and was the managing director at the company you were really sort of progressing and flourishing at, to having them on as a guest on the podcast as well.
Full circle moment.
Full circle moment, yeah. So I think we've been chatting enough, Sarah. Let's move on to hear what Caroline's got to say. We hope everyone enjoys episode 1, and thank you for joining.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of STEM Conversations. So this podcast is created to share stories, ideas and experiences shaping science, technology, engineering and maths. I'm Sarah and I'm joined by my co-host Ash.
Thanks, Sarah. Today we're joined by Caroline Hamilton. Caroline was Managing Director at White Rose Education and is the author of Collins Math textbooks and OUP practice journals. Excitingly, she's now co-founder of Rethink Maths with Tony Staniff, where they're changing the way the world sees and learns maths. Alongside her work in education, she's a passionate advocate for gender equality and leadership. So, Caroline, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Sarah and Ash. It's so great to see you both. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm so honoured that I'm your first guest, so thanks so much. This is a really important topic for me, something that's really close to my heart, both professionally and personally. So looking forward to the conversation.
It's really great to have you as our very first guest. And in this episode, we are exploring a theme that is both timely and vital. So we're discussing how we can support and promote women in STEM. And that's not only encouraging more women to enter these fields, but ensuring that they have the visibility, confidence, and opportunities to lead and thrive once they're there. But before we get into the big themes, Caroline, what have you been working on recently and what's exciting you most in your career right now?
It's been an extremely unusual year for me, to say the least. There's been lots of change, but as everyone says, change is rarely a bad thing. I've recently launched a new company with Tony Staniff called Rethink Maths. It's built on strong values and 5 core missions where we feel that we can add value and make a real difference to the sector. The missions are Rethink Foundations, Rethink Inclusion, Rethink Confidence, Rethink Real World, and Rethink Teaching. We feel there's a lot of great work already going on in the sector with maths education, and we hope to support and add to that with our new company, Rethink Maths. I'd say the most exciting part for me at the moment is I've got that opportunity to begin with a blank sheet of paper again, which is, you don't often get that, do you? You know, it's real privileged, and I'm in full control of what we do and how we do it, can build it in our way. And my co-founder is Tony, and I know you both know Tony, so we are not short of ideas whatsoever. We've probably got too many ideas, but again, it's great to be able to really think again and think about what we can do slightly differently to support maths education.
Like that blank sheet of paper idea, isn't it? And like you said, both Ash and I have worked with Tony.
And you.
Yeah, and yourself. So it's so exciting to see what's going to come from that.
Okay, so let's dive in. I want to start with a big question first. So why this? Why now? Why does champion women in STEM matter to you personally, Caroline?
For me, it's about making sure STEM benefits from the full range of talent and perspectives we've got out there. So we talk a lot about getting more women into STEM, and that is crucial, but really it's about balance. If we want the best ideas and the strongest innovation, we need the great minds of men, women and non-binary people represented. Women often bring those different perspectives, I think, so different ways of thinking and sometimes a more collaborative approach. That diversity of thought makes teams and solutions stronger. Combining women in STEM isn't about fairness, in my opinion. It's just about making sure the sector has access to the broadest possible skill set, and surely combining the strengths of people of all genders is going to result in a stronger, more diverse solution for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to see kind of the different balance and perspectives that different people bring, but I think it's so important that we are giving women the equal opportunity to be in these leadership roles and believe in themselves. I know it's something that I've struggled a lot more with personally, you know, over my career for definite, in terms of thinking that I am ready for leadership roles or, you know, being a female leader in STEM. So yeah, it's great. And thinking about that balance as well. So we're going to take you back to the start of your career then. We're going to start at the beginning, and we'd like to know what first inspired you to pursue a career in STEM.
Okay, I'll try my best. This might be a little bit long.
That's fine, we're here.
Bit of an unusual journey. But I studied accounting and finance at university, and I chose that route mainly because there was someone in my family that was an accountant, and I really looked up to him and thought, oh, that looks like a good career. I'm quite good at maths. I enjoy it. I did that at A level. So I'll do that. You know, I didn't, at that age, I was quite immature and I didn't really think too deeply about where I was going, apart from that I wanted to be successful. So I did that course. It was very male dominated. My lecturers were all male. I didn't really make any friends that were girls. There were a few girls on my course, but my best friend was Peter. He ended up my study partner, and we both kind of just got through it. Neither of us were, you know, top of the class. I didn't really enjoy it, I'll be honest. I didn't overly analyse it at the time, but looking back, there was a significant lack of visible female role models, and perhaps that did contribute to me not taking it any further, I'm not sure. But following that degree, I knew very strongly that I didn't want to take the accounting studies any further. So the next step would have been AAT. And I thought, no way, I can't do that. I wouldn't have got through it, I don't think. So I went into a basic finance role. I did pretty well. I always had a great work ethic. And after a few years in that role, although I'd progressed a little bit, I felt I needed a big change. Frankly, I was bored in that role. I didn't really see a future. So I thought, I'm going to have to change something. I was 27. I needed to make a change. And I looked to the best female role model I had in my life, and that was my older sister. She was an English teacher, and I decided, right, I'm going to train to teach. This is what I'm going to do.
Oh.
And I feel bad saying this. I hope it doesn't come across too badly, but I knew at the time there was a maths teacher shortage, and that did contribute to my decision into maths, because I knew that would be my quickest route in, and time wasn't on my side. At 27, I already had a house, and I needed to quickly make that change in my career. I didn't have the privilege of the money behind me to let me take a few years over it. So I chose maths, went for it, and within a year I was qualified. I did a graduate training programme, and I was a qualified maths teacher and starting my first job. So I'm really glad I made that change, but I'm really glad that I spent a few years in industry as well. I think for me, it definitely shaped who I am. It was the right thing for me to do. I wouldn't have been ready to teach at 22 years old. 100%, I would not have been ready. I know some people are. And during my training year, the head of maths was a very, very strong, experienced female leader. I'd say that's the first time I'd met someone like her. And she really inspired me from that time. And she's always in my mind now when I'm leading teams. She was great. So yeah, that's kind of my journey and how I've ended up in STEM and in maths.
That's interesting, Caroline, because that actually feels really similar to my route, and I'd not realised it was so similar, because I was 27 when I did my teacher training, and I think had I not been blessed by being in a department with a very strong female leader, my path would be very different now too. So I love hearing that.
Oh, great.
Early career paths can be full of both opportunity and learning, especially in fields that are still evolving to become more inclusive and more balanced. Were there any challenges you faced early on? I know you've mentioned it was very, very male heavy. Were there any other challenges you faced early on, and how did you navigate those?
I think, like a lot of women, especially early on, and I know this from experience, working with a lot of women, I really underestimated my own voice. I still do. Doing a podcast like this, I'm thinking, does anyone really want to listen to this? I think it's just a natural thing that's built in sometimes, especially with women. I was often the only introvert in the room. I was one of the few women in leadership meetings, and it really took time for me to find my confidence in that quieter style. What really helped me was finding mentors, both male and female, who valued that substance over volume. And I've got to give Tony credit. He really believed in me, and he gave me the space and time to find that inner confidence. And it took a long time. You're talking years for this to come out and me to really understand my value. And then later in my career, I've tried to do the same for others. So making sure people feel heard, even if, or especially if, they're not the loudest voice at the table. I've never been great at networking. And I know everyone says, oh, you need to network and it's the best thing for your career. And I kind of I thought, I can't do it. I'm not good at going into a room full of strangers and just chatting to people. But then a few years ago, I thought, I'm going to have to improve this side of me. I need to make a conscious effort and work hard on networking in the sector. And honestly, it has been brilliant. And now I'm that person that says you need to network. It's really great and it'll do great things for your confidence and your career. I just feel so much more connected to people in the sector. I've genuinely consider some of them friends. My favourite ever network meeting that I'm still part of now is the BESA Women's Network. BESA stands for British Educational Supplier Association, and there's lots of meetings, but the women's one is great because you don't even have to be a member to join it. That's how passionate they are about female leaders. And it's such a safe space for inspiring women. Everyone in that group, they share the highs, but we share our lows with each other as well. We see both sides, and everyone in that group is just rooting for each other and championing each other. It's great. I do think a lot of great work has been done at the top level. I think there's definitely more visibility for women in leadership and on boards now, and that's brilliant. However, I do think there are still pockets where bias lingers, and I have been there. I've been in board meetings where I'm the only woman in the room, and the pre-meeting small talk is football banter. Like that,
yeah.
you wouldn't actually think it still exists, but it does.
Yeah.
And that I don't think anyone's necessarily doing it on purpose, but those unspoken small habits, they can quickly make you just feel slightly on the outside. And that's the sort of subtle things that I think we really need to work on and just make sure they're not a thing anymore going forward.
So, speaking of BESA, Caroline, which I think you potentially underplayed, you won BESA's Women in Education Award. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that recognition means for you personally, what kind of impact it's had on your work and visibility in the sector?
Yeah, well, I mean, no one does anything for an award, do they? But it is lovely when it happens. So it was a really, really nice moment. So I was very happy to receive that recognition. It meant a lot because it felt like a win for the team and the culture that we'd built. I don't see myself as a role model, but I do know that visibility and recognition does help others. I've had that feedback, and it's lovely to be that role model for other women that are aspiring to go into leadership positions. And at the time, I was in the phase of trying to build my networking skills. I was really working hard on that. And I particularly bonded with the other finalists in the category. It was really lovely to talk to those women and understand what they were doing in their roles and why they were a finalist for this award. And it gave me so much more confidence to continue that work on my network and building the people that I knew in the sector, and gave me a lot more confidence, I think, from that point on, for sure.
And are you still in touch with the other finalists now, Caroline?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of them, she won it the year after, which was lovely.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and then another one, she chairs the women's group that I talked about now. Started it this year, and she's doing a brilliant job. So we're all really quite close, and whenever we go to the events, it's lovely to have a really good catch up and a coffee. Like I say, it's more than meeting someone from another business now. It feels genuine. It feels like we really are getting to know each other. Yeah.
So when you were chatting then, you talked about kind of being that visible role model, and in a sense, I know you wouldn't call yourself a role model. I personally would.
I would.
I definitely would. But are there any sort of moments where you feel that you've actively worked to open the door for other women? And then are there some points that really stand out to you when you've been able to champion women in leadership or in STEM positions or make space for others to grow?
Great question. And there are a few moments that I am really proud of that I've contributed to. I think, as I've already said, I'm very pro introverted or quiet leadership. It doesn't mean that I don't love an extrovert too. There's a place for everyone, but I very much champion those people because I know they haven't necessarily been championed before. So I spend a lot of time looking for this in people and finding hidden potential. I've worked with many women who have joined my team, my previous team, feeling pretty low, to be honest, pretty broken and overlooked. And I'm sure Mary Kate won't mind me talking about her, because I always talk about Mary Kate because she's brilliant. She's our MD at Rethink Maths, and she's just a great example that when I started working with her 8 years ago, I knew literally within 2 days that she was special. She didn't know, but I definitely knew. And she had no confidence whatsoever. And I think I'd spotted 3 things in her straight away. She had an absolute excellent work ethic and attitude. Excellent. And I have that, I feel, and I look for that in others. Very, very intelligent. So far more intelligent than me. And she was very fast, very fast. So I thought, oh, wow, that she's got something here. And I knew the rest of it because there wasn't, I don't want to say there wasn't much else, but she wasn't, when you looked at her, she did not look like a leader. You know, she was terrified to the point of having a photograph taken.
Yeah.
But I thought, I think I can train this girl. She's got something special. And I did. I mentored her. I took her under my wing, and she made miracles happen when we had lots of work to do and it needed to be done to a high standard. But the best thing about it is she does the same for others now. She does exactly what I did. And she's probably mentored more people than me now into leadership positions.
Yeah.
She's similar to me. She looks for those quiet people that have something that needs to be found, and she builds them up and gives them confidence. So, you know, that's really a proud thing that I think I've done over my career. I also, although I've not got children myself, I do feel I've contributed to supporting women starting families as well. I've always made sure that no matter what's going on, the absolute best person gets the promoted post. And if they happen to be on maternity leave, they're on maternity leave and they get a chance for the interview when it's appropriate. And then if they're right, they get the promotion. And at times that's meant thinking about roles slightly differently. So we've had people step into very senior roles that really should be full-time, but we've compromised on a 4-day week, for example, because they deserved that role, but they really needed a 4-day week. So they've got a baby at home and that's all they could manage. So I've tried really hard with that. And something that I've learned massively, that it didn't hit me till a few years ago, actually, but September is like so difficult for mums and dads. It's really, really, really difficult when your child is starting nursery or reception or school. It is so emotional at times that they've got to send the child off. The start and finish times are all over the place. It's a logistical nightmare. And I just think as employers, we need to be really mindful of that and really flexible. I don't think it's right that parents in that stage need to use their precious annual leave that they're trying the best to save as much as they can, because they've also got school holidays to think of on that transition into school. So I've always been really generous with parental leave and flexibility. And I do think it pays you back tenfold. You know, if you're thinking, if you want to think about it in a cold, analytical way and productivity, I think you get the productivity back, even though, you know, you give more time. So I think I've done quite a lot of work with that and tried my best to put myself in the shoes of parents. And like I say, it's mums and dads. It's not just mums. And then the final thing that I think I've tried hard at in the last few years is raising the profile of menopause in the workplace.
Yes.
It's great that it's becoming more open, the conversation, and we did training for both men and women in the workplace. I could see some of the men feeling a bit uncomfortable, but it's right. You know, we need to understand what's going on. It can be a really difficult time, and often women are at the very peak of their career when that comes in. So you think they've had a really successful career, they're at the peak, and then all of a sudden hit menopause and everything can change. You can get brain fog. Obviously, it doesn't affect everyone the same way. Some people just breeze through it and other people are really heavily affected. But following that training, what it did do is it just opened up the conversation so much. So many women said, oh, I'm really struggling.
Yeah.
Or how are you? Oh, me too. I'm really struggling. I've got hot sweats. I need the window open all the time. I feel bad on my colleagues because I'm too hot. Just little things like that. And I think it just makes people feel safer and seen, and that can make the difference. You're not solving anything. It doesn't make the brain fog go away. It doesn't make the hot sweats go away, but it helps you just share it and a problem shared is a problem halved, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
I'd say they're the key areas where I feel quite proud of and where I think I've made a bit of a difference.
And so you should, by the way, because we've seen all three of those things in action, and I think we're probably proud of you for doing them too. And I know that when we worked in the same building, Sarah and I, with yourself, there was this culture around menopause where everyone knew someone who would go through the menopause one day. We had people in the office that were going through the menopause that had this confidence to just speak really openly about it, have a fan on the desk, let us borrow the fan for 5 minutes if we were to, because we'd run up the stairs, windows were open, no questions asked. And I know that that was because of the reminders, the emails, the training around menopause awareness. And I think that that's something that was absolutely spot on, and I think that it should be prevalent everywhere in every business, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It gives you that confidence and that voice, doesn't it, to be able to speak quite openly and honestly about these things and raise awareness, raise understanding, raise compassion, then raise empathy, and that only creates sort of happier and safer people at work, I think. So I think we can see from what you've been speaking about there there has been a lot of progress for, women in STEM, women in leadership positions. But if we come back, so we've done a little bit of a journey of starting right at the start of your career and taking you through. If we come back to the present day, what barriers do you think still exist for women in STEM? And what can be done at both individual and systemic levels to sort of break those down?
Nice big question there towards the end, Sarah.
Big question. All the way through.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I have been thinking quite deeply about it, and I think we're doing a lot, which is great. I'm not sure we're capturing girls early enough and providing them with the appropriate role models in the space. And I think it's still a bit down to luck. You're lucky if you have those role models, and if you don't, maybe you don't. Which, it should be far more balanced than that. I feel like there's more we could do in more subtle ways with ordinary young women enjoying STEM. I think there's quite a lot of untapped potential on social media. I've got some big ideas around this area, actually, of things we could do with women in STEM and social media at the right sort of age range and an attainable level for younger girls. But obviously, to bring that to life, you need time and you need funding. But it's on my mind, and when the time's right, I'll definitely try to do something in that space. I also think it's really important. I've talked a bit about balance, but I'll just emphasize it here that it's important that not all young women will enjoy STEM. That's absolutely fine. It's not for every girl, just as it's not for every boy as well. So I think we don't want to push it so far that girls feel like they really should be doing this thing that they don't want to do and they don't enjoy. So I think there's more room to create more balance and make it equal. And I think there's things we can do with more ordinary young women talking about STEM in a positive way. But yeah, I think that's as far as my thinking's got at the moment. I know that was a lot of going around the houses, but that's where I'm at. I don't know if you two have any more thoughts. I'd love to hear yours as well on that.
What you said about sort of catching girls younger is absolutely something I agree with, because I'll be honest, I was 17 before I started taking an interest in any of the sciences. And even then, I'll be honest, it wasn't biology, chemistry or physics, it was psychology. That's how I ended up with a Bachelor of Science degree. So it wasn't even then till I'd graduated university and was getting career advice that I was steered towards science and being a science teacher. I didn't really know my options. The subjects that I picked at school were ones that I really enjoyed, but they were typically the ones that young girls were steered towards at that time. I did textiles, loved it, and it was very difficult. Hats off to anyone who was very, very good in that field, but I do feel that I wasn't steered towards those things. What about you, Sarah?
I'd say it's very much the same from a primary perspective. I think children have this idea that sort of a scientist is you're really stereotypical in a lab coat, that sort of thing, and they don't see very much for the sciences for them. And I feel like even by the time we get into like upper key stage 2, children have already made the decision either STEM is for me or STEM is not for me, and it's really hard then to unpick that. But I think it's definitely very much about having that representation and that wider understanding of what STEM actually looks like, people working in the field or what roles may be available to them, because there are so many children that say they would love to be a vet, for example, when they're in year 1 or year 2.
That was me.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be a vet because I'd get too upset.
I would.
But, you know, and then not understanding that that is a STEM career role. So it's about understanding of careers, understanding of that, having that representation of seeing themselves in there as well, I think would make a huge difference. But you did mention a good point, Ash, as well, about even as young as, I know that if I've ever spoken to early years colleagues, like toys can be quite different sometimes for girls and for boys. So really thinking about engaging children from as young as possible, developing that curiosity.
So, Caroline, you've given us a great sense of your journey, challenges, successes, lessons you've learned. You've even asked us to do the same, so thanks for that. As we look ahead, what is your vision for the future of women in STEM, and what do you think progress really looks like in, let's say, 5-10 years?
My hope is that in 5 or 10 years' time, we're not having to talk about gender in STEM in this same way, because it just feels normal. So I'm sorry, this podcast would not exist. We wouldn't need to talk about it, because it's just balanced and everyone's represented, whether it's in STEM, whether it's seeing more boys teaching young children, for example. We haven't got many men in the early years. It'd be great. If we want more women in STEM, where do we want more men as well? I think we need to think about that. And it's making sure that teachers have the time and tools to nurture that confidence early on. And Sarah, you just mentioned career pathways. Teachers have got so much to do, understanding every possible route as well to support the young people in front of them is difficult. So how can we take that off teachers and put an expert in there that can make sure that those pathways are clear for all learners? And then in terms of leadership, I'd love to see a culture that values empathy and clarity as much as assertiveness. And I know it does in some areas, but I do think there's still work to do.
So to end our conversation, we would like to give listeners one key takeaway from each episode. And you've had so many things that you've spoken about. So what's one idea, perspective, or piece of advice, really, that you'd love listeners to carry away with them after the conversation?
I think I'd like anyone listening to this to remember the word balance. I think if that's the one thing that's taken away, it's that. And empowering women does not mean excluding men. It means widening that circle so that everyone can contribute the best. I think we do need to be careful. The young men out there that are now becoming a bit low in confidence as well. And we need to just be careful, because it's great to empower women, but let's not forget our young men, or then in 10 years' time we'll be trying to rectify that. So I think the balance is the key takeaway I'd like people to go away with.
Thank you so much for joining us as our very first guest. What a way to start the podcast.
Yeah, it's been so great to hear your perspective on education, on leadership. And for me, I think the idea of vision for future of women in STEM, even if that does mean our podcast doesn't exist.
Thank you so much, both of you. It's been lovely. It's been great catching up. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm very excited to listen to the rest of your series as well. It's going to be brilliant.
And thank you to everyone listening. Don't forget to follow STEM Conversations wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more stories and ideas shaping science, technology, engineering and maths.